Retirement is a trap. Don't fall for it. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's installment in our book review series on Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash, this will be our 18th installation. We're going to be covering retirement. This is a section that Nelson particularly covers on page 66 and 67. So this is part 5. The retirement trap is what he calls this section. And I like where he leads with at the start of this section. He begins talking about how he has a personal file for posterity. And when I read that, I also remembered listening to Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn would speak about certain things that he was leaving behind, and he was encouraging other people to leave behind for posterity. And those were things like photographs. Of course, photographs mean a lot to most of us. It's a phenomenon that we have few pictures of earlier generations, and as much as we would like to have seen more and known more, he was encouraging people, of course, to leave photography behind for posterity. Another thing that he encouraged folks to leave behind was a library, to have a family library of books that meant something to you or influenced you. And my wife and I, we've read to our children throughout their childhood. I still read every night, or we miss some nights, of course, but we have this habit as a family, and lots of mornings as well. But in particular at nighttime, we have a reading. We're going through the Three Musketeers currently right now. So leaving a family library. And then a third one that I know of is Jim Rohn would mention journals, much like this one that I have right here, where I've written down notes about the retirement trap in preparing to do this episode so that I can leave this content not just for the clients that I have, not just for folks that are learning and vetting and attempting to understand infinite banking and begin to apply it in their own lives, but for future generations of my own family as well. I would love for our children to be able to see this information. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It's an amazing phenomenon. So when Nelson talked about leaving a personal file for posterity, I really connected with that. And I hope, and I'm mentioning all of this to encourage you to consider what types of habits, what types of collectibles, what types of heirlooms would you like to leave behind? Consider that for yourself. I know that there have been other things along the way that I have also incorporated because of this sentiment of leaving for posterity, whether it was initiating family meetings or writing legacy letters, just writing a full page letter for one of my children when they were on my mind that day, just taking the time out to write out a nice handwritten letter just for that child and talking about things that are relevant or that are on my mind or that I would love to impart to them in the event that I wasn't there to do that in person. So I'm encouraging you to think about things that you would like to leave behind, heirlooms, whether that's anything from experiences that you have together or habits or possessions, all the things that are important to you. Consider that. But let's move into retirement in particular. I appreciate Nelson starting with things that he would like to leave for posterity, but we begin to look at some important aspects when we even consider the idea, the concept of retirement. And that does lead us to government. See, there are some issues with retirement, and let's go with government for the first. Government, here's a quote from this section, government knows how to order the lives of people better than do the people themselves. Now, is that so? I believe not, but government certainly feels like it does know how to best order the lives of people. And just think about Social Security for an example. Now, Nash called it. He said that Social Security would fail. And if you run the numbers, this is really interesting. The easiest place to do this is just simply go to the debt clock. All right, so look up on the internet the debt clock, U.S. debt clock, and it will show you current debt real time. Now, that's the same entity, the government. That's the same entity that in debt is supposed to be providing this security for folks. And if you'll have conversations with folks that currently live on Social Security, especially if they have nothing else, no pensions, no kind of savings, no kind of retirement, and they're just beholden to the government for that, it really brings this idea to bear of abdicating past what I'm going to call passive income years, and that's me using Nash's words. That's just a mentality. That's a philosophy that I've used. He said that he was eradicating retirement from his personal vocabulary and speaking on passive income instead. That's certainly what I've adopted. But folks that are living on Social Security are living out what it means to be beholden to the government, while the government thinks that it knows best how to order the lives of people. Now, a historical example that he gives is concerning the Soviet Union, right? And Nash is saying, well, folks at that time, when the USSR, Soviet Union, failed, that they were saying that it happened so quickly. And yet, what he points out was that it actually didn't happen quickly. It should not have been a surprise. This was something that was just in the works, and then people perhaps just noticed it right at the end. And he goes on to say that, well, okay, Social Security then, it's created for the common good. Let me interject this is not in the book, but Rudyard Kipling, I came across a section of a poem that he wrote. He wrote the famous poem If, but in another poem he talked about, and he did a play on words where he said, instead of robbing from Peter to pay Paul, he said, robbing from select Peter to pay collective Paul. Now, if you're following what I'm saying about government, about intervention, we'll be talking about taxation, all these different things, you'll understand what I'm saying. Robbing from some to give to others for the common good. And remember back when we were talking about the Willie Sutton law, where Nash was describing what it would be like to be robbed in a public place. It would be an atrocity. Of course, everyone would witness the fact that, hey, this guy robbed that guy at gunpoint. It was awful. It shouldn't have been done. But he talks about, well, if everybody were let in on what was getting ready to take the place and they were told that they could participate with the robbery, then they're going to be that much more likely to go along with it because they are going to gain, wrongfully, but they're going to stand to gain from that interaction. So just remember that part as we keep moving through this section on retirement. He continues to address pensions is another aspect of this retirement sphere. Okay, so pensions, and he does make a reference to the pension idea. This is a book. I've read it. I highly encourage you to read it. The Pension Idea by Paul Poirot, Poirot. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But The Pension Idea, it's a short read, but it's really good. It's really good. It's an eye-opener by Paul Poirot. And then some other issues with retirement is, number one, a danger of deferred taxation. Now, I'm not a tax expert. I'm not giving tax advice. And I know that out in the financial world, there are folks who say live debt-free. There are folks who say use debt as a tool. I'm just simply saying, like Nash here, I'm asking the question, how much do we want to subject ourselves to an unknown tax event in the future, a potential tax event in the future? So there can certainly be a risk or a danger in delaying or deferring taxation. And then let me jump to a paragraph where I'd actually like to read exactly what Nash wrote, and this is on page 66, right-hand column, second paragraph down. When government creates a problem, read onerous taxation, and then turns around and creates an exception to the problem that they created, read tax-sheltered retirement plans, etc., aren't you just a little bit suspicious that you are being manipulated. You understand that? Think about it. Why would government create a rule and then begin to create exceptions to the rule? And then he's saying, doesn't that make you feel like a puppet on a string? Wouldn't that make you feel manipulated? Food for thought. Just consider, because all of these things, these 401ks, these pensions, and he's actually getting ready to get into the history of where this originated from. Where was the genesis of retirement? And he makes a couple of points. Number one, retirement is not mentioned in a positive light anywhere in Scripture. Nelson likes using Scripture. I love that, and I love sharing that. Moses never retired, for example. Never retired. And think about the definition of retiring. Doesn't it describe a going back process? It's the opposite of an advancement. Advancing is moving forward, making progress, and retiring is going back. Now, again, I'm not bashing anyone for wanting to have more opportunities for leisure later on. I want that for my own self as well. I'd like to have more and more opportunities for the things that I would like to do. Sure, no question about it. But what I'm saying is that passive income can facilitate that in a different way than these government qualified plans where folks are being manipulated. And while you're talking about manipulation, is there any market? Because again, when it comes to retirement, folks end up talking about the market. Is there any market that's not manipulated? I'm just asking. And are there any exceptions to these rules that are not manipulated or that can't be manipulated? So when Nash was saying things that we mentioned earlier, like Social Security would fail, why would Social Security fail? Or how could it fail? Could it be that government would tap into what is supposed to be there as that social net for folks to be able to cover what they want? Again, think about that debt clock and what that looks like. But while Moses never retired, Bismarck in Germany, 1890, was portraying this idea of, well, there just are not enough jobs for these young folks that need to come into the workforce. So we need to phase out. We need to move the older, and here let me point out, the more mature, the more experienced folks. Let's phase those folks out so that we can make. So in my mind, I clearly see that is a scarcity mindset, to say not enough of something. Here I would point out that we were made by a creator. We are creators ourselves. There's an infinite amount of creation that can be. And that, yes, that is a play on words. We're talking about the infinite banking concept, and Nash makes scriptural references, so I'm going to as well. But what's the limit on creativity? And even when it comes to jobs, I mean, just think about the evolution that has transpired over time, how so many things have evolved to where we don't have to do all the same things the way they used to be done. We can actually get really specific in some particular area, let's say, and that allows somebody else to get real specific in some particular area, and we can be so beneficial to each other because here's an expert and somebody who's really dialed in on their craft, and here's somebody else who's an expert and really dialed in on their craft, and we don't have to be all things everywhere. Okay, so just sharing food for thought and some general ideas along with this history. So Bismarck in Germany, 1890, began projecting and promoting this concept of retirement, retiring out of the marketplace to make room because there were not enough jobs. And then Nash asks great questions like, well, what would Bismarck have thought of Walmart? What would Bismarck have thought of? And then some more modern day companies to add to that list would be Microsoft, Amazon. So just think about how the market has changed in not a small way, but a significant way. I mean, how could Amazon have been anticipated? before it was what it is now. Such a change, such an evolution of how things are done. And has that not made so much more opportunity for everyone, made things so much better? That continual growth and that continual evolution. And that mindset, that philosophy, that reality is so very different from the mindset of retirement. So again, another historical point then would be in World War II, this idea of benefits, and that's me using quotes to use that particular term, benefits. Okay. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about this, for example. Robert Kiyosaki would talk about how his poor dad would tell him to go get a good job with benefits. So that's something that I've heard for sure, and perhaps you have as well. That's been promoted to us. That started around the World War II era, where lots of things were happening. Now think about this. Nash talks in the book here about wages being frozen, groceries and gas being rationed. Again, look at that. What is that? That's government interfering with the market. That's government thinking that it knows best. That's government saying, well, you wouldn't know to do this for yourself for your latter years in life, so we should create this program and we will decide where the exceptions are, and we will use that money or misuse that money and everything that's therein, but you will have benefits. So what is that? What are benefits? Well, benefits are, or should be, compensation. So what instead of could have been direct compensation is now a benefit that points us back to that topic of deferment. Okay, there's this benefit that is income, essentially, because the consumer pays for everything. Remember that. We've covered that in the book. That's a percentage of income that's being deferred away from you. You never see those dollars. Never see those dollars, like so many other things that are taken from our cash flows before we ever see them. Again, i.e. onerous taxation, like Nash mentioned. But these benefits began to be introduced in World War II. So here, just look at this totality of the circumstances, the benefits being introduced, the marketplace being told, well, we need these folks out of the way so that we can get these folks into the marketplace. And another timestamp to consider is the IRS. Okay, so the Internal Revenue Service, 1913 began. Now, very relevant, of course, for this book study, this book review, and the implementation of the infinite banking concept is whole life insurance. It's the ideal product. It's the appropriate entity for privatizing the banking in your life. It, as a product, predates the IRS. How interesting. It predates 1913. And that's why it, as an asset, has so many of the characteristics that it does that make it the ideal asset, the ideal entity for privatizing your banking. And we've covered those, of course, in different points along this book review. But just because taxation has been something that's been mentioned here, just think about that. In a policy, you're paying premiums with taxed dollars. And then, once the premiums have been paid, they can grow and compound in that contract, in that policy, that properly structured whole life policy with a mutual company that pays dividends for your whole life, growing and compounding the premium dollars, right? And the cash value in that policy must grow. That's guaranteed. It's going to grow. And its growth in the policy itself is tax deferred. Now, however, because of policy loans, you have tax-free access to capital. That's just the nature of that contract. It has a net present-day value. That's the cash value. Yes, it's got that future greater number, which is the death benefit. That's also guaranteed, and also tax-free. So by owning this policy, this ideal entity, you can have tax-free access to capital during your lifetime, and that number always goes up. The policy cash values always grow year over year, month over month, day over day. On weekends and holidays, it doesn't matter because it's not tied to the market. And also, at the end of the day, at graduation time, after retirement, after those passive income years, which again, let me interject there. How fantastic is it to be able to have a private family banking system that you can have tax-free access to in your passive income years, to be able to supplement your income, to be able to be your income. So that's where systemization, of course, comes into play so very much. I started with one policy in 2016, sure, but now my wife and I have been building a system of policies, and we will continue to do that to facilitate passive income later in life. But then eventually, what I was going to say is, of course, the death benefit of these policies is a tax-free windfall to the next generation. So your heirs or beneficiaries, whoever you designate, is going to receive that tax-free windfall. It's a beautiful thing. And by creating the habit and the lifestyle of becoming your own banker, when that first generation of policies matures, either at our passing or at the maturity of the policy itself, live to 121, that's okay with me, then that windfall is what can fill the reservoir of the remaining system to create a self-sustaining system, which when you're thinking intergenerationally is just very awesome. Now, one particular point that is eye-opening, again, as to the thinking, the mindset, the attitude behind retirement, is that Nash points out that so very many people, when they do retire, soon pass after they retire. And I believe that he's trying to point out purpose. Us having work, us having a goal, us having tasks on our plate to accomplish, us having endeavors. It gives us purpose. We're providing value to each other. Remember me talking earlier about, getting really good at something. And I believe that everybody has their gifts and their talents, and being able to provide that to folks at large is so very valuable. And when you do this and I do this and the other guy does that, and we put ourselves together, we can accomplish more together in that way by each of us individually pursuing our own purpose. It benefits everyone at large. But just by us, and let me point out the distinction as I think about it right here and I express this, by us privately contracting in some way, you do this, we agree on the terms and the conditions, great, awesome, and I provide this service out in the marketplace, and those who are agreeable, they work with me, and vice versa, and so on and so forth, by private contract, not by government interference. Big difference. And at the end of the day, when you think about and when we look into what is a whole life policy, well, it's a contract. It's a unilateral contract. It's the insurance company vetting me, checking my health, checking my age, all these different things, whatever that an insurance company does, of course, and me saying, well, I want to pay this amount of premium, and yes, that amount of death benefit's good for me, and yes, this contract looks good, giving me guaranteed access to capital, and again, I'm deciding what level to fund that policy at, and I agree to pay those premiums. It's just us privately contracting with one another. It's beautiful. Now, I have 3 real-life individuals that are mentioned by name right here at the end of this section on retirement. One of them is John Templeton, who is actually mentioned on page 37 as well in the book. Page 37 would have been where we were talking about creating the entity. Perhaps I could put up which episode that is right here. But John Templeton, who was the creator of the Templeton Fund, who, quote-unquote, retired at age 80, is now doing only charitable work. This is me reading from Nash's book. Now only doing charitable work and working harder than ever. Made the observation that all should plan on working to at least 70. So Nelson, by name, mentions John Templeton personally, himself, working harder than ever at age 80 after he had, quote-unquote, retired. And Templeton was encouraging folks to consider not working or not stopping work before 70. Again, I believe this ties into purpose, value being brought to the marketplace. Nelson does also reference Leonard E. Reed, who died at age 85 in his sleep. And Leonard E. Reed was integral in starting FEE, which is the Foundation for Economic Education. This was Nelson's personal mentor, Leonard E. Reed, R-E-A-D. He has a lot of works that you can find online, lots of materials to be able to get to. In fact, Nelson said that some of this work that was connected with FEE, such as Paul Perot's book that I've already mentioned on the pension idea, was reproduced by FEE, by the Foundation for Economic Education, to be able to continue to share these ideas from prior generations on this subject of retirement, government interference, purpose, providing value, etc. And the third is going to be Edward Deming. And I've since seen some neat videos. I've been able to find some videos on YouTube about this gentleman recorded sharing 14 points. He had 14 points, and then he also shared 7 deadly sins. And Nash actually put lists both of those on page 67. The 14 points are: create constancy of purpose, adopt a new philosophy, end the practices of purchasing at lowest prices, institute leadership, eliminate empty slogans, eliminate numerical quotas, institute on-the-job training, drive out fear, break down barriers between departments. 10 is take action to accomplish the transformation. Improve constantly and forever the process of production and service. 12 is cease dependence on mass inspection. Remove barriers to pride of workmanship. And then 14, retrain vigorously. Now, as I read these, I can certainly see how he was influenced. Nelson was influenced in coming up with his principles about implementing infinite banking. I mean, just to name one, number 14 from Deming was retrain vigorously. Well, that automatically makes me think of rethink your thinking. Can this process be better? And that was another one of the points earlier. And then the 7 deadly sins. Number 1, lack of constancy of purpose. Again, we see purpose there. 2, emphasizing short-term profits and immediate dividends. That's a deadly sin, he's saying. Number 3, evaluation of performance, merit rating, or annual review. Number 4, mobility of top management. 5, running a company only on visible figures. 6, excessive medical costs. And then 7, excessive costs of warranty. And then he references Cummings and Worley, 1993, page 328. So 14 points, 7 deadly sins. Edward Deming, I would encourage you to find him online. He has books as well that can be bought. I would encourage you to check out his stuff. And that's one of the benefits of doing this book review, is we do get to see what Nash is talking about. We do get some glimpses because he's sharing it with us, where he was influenced from, and then we can look into those folks and their works and what they did in the world and what example they left, which, if I go back to the beginning of where we started this particular conversation, you think about what type of impact you're seeking to make and influence that you'd like to leave behind, and what purpose it is that you're pursuing right now, and do it in an intentional way. Do it in a long-range thinking way. Think big picture. And part of that big picture must be retirement, which I, of course, am going to call passive income. We don't have to be beholden to the government or anyone else for our need of passive, or our desire of passive income later in life. By becoming our own banker today, by accounting for the need of the banking function in our lives, recapturing interest that otherwise would have gone to somebody else, that capitalizes us, and therefore we can compound that process over our lifetime to end with a passive income time of life that is meaningful, that just empowers us even that much more to continue pursuing whatever our purpose is, and to make that much bigger of an impact on future generations and the world at large. I'm so much better off for you pursuing whatever your purpose is. And I believe and I hope that you'll be so much better off than me pursuing what my purpose is, which today is sharing the idea that you can become your own banker, that I would encourage you to consider passive income and approaching your purpose with a passive income time of life in mind, and not so much a retirement where we are beholden to the commercial banks or to the government or anyone else. If you are interested in having more financial autonomy and independence in your life, I would encourage you to keep studying this subject and implementing it. I had a great conversation today with a client that I've had for right at a year. It was a beautiful conversation. He actually was the one who initiated the conversation and wanted to talk with me about some sections of the book, which is a lot of fun. So I do hope that this book review series has been helpful. Make sure to put any questions or comments that you have that'll be helpful in the comment section below. Otherwise, to have a conversation with me about what it could look like for you to implement or grow and scale the infinite banking concept into your household or your business or your investing, then don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can contact me and find more resources at durhamtalents.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. Retirement is a trap. Don't fall for it. I hope you have a great day. Take care. And just think about Social Security, and just think about social. Nash called it. He said social. Now Nash called it. He said that Social Security. I still feel like this is going to be awful. I remember having messed this up before. Now Nash called it. He said that social